Hello, Rob Walker here. So recently at my office day job, as I've been clicking away at my keyboard and mouse, I have been listening to Stephen King's audiobook 11/22/63. For those of you who don't know, this book is a departure from Stephen King's usual reputation of creating horror stories. 11/22/63 is all about time travel, and specifically the Kennedy assassination and how one person who can travel through time might prevent such a tragedy from occurring. And while that concept in and of itself is completely fascinating, what really struck me was King's description of the past. You see, the character Jake Epping, a school teacher who has found a way to travel through time, goes to 1958, and as he's taking in the sights and the smells, he ends up going to a Five and Dime where he drinks a mug of root beer. Jake's root beer experience is described beautifully and intricately and actually made my mouth water. So for the past week since I first heard that scene on audiobook, I have been obsessed with finding root beer. And I bought this Zuber Fizz, which I hope is good. I've never had it before. So in my quest for root beer, as spurred forth by King's description of the full and richness of 1958's root beer, I've started thinking about King's story and time travel in our own history. Which leads me to tell you 3 time travel adjacent stories in this video. Story 1, the story of John Titor. In the late 1990s, an individual started showing up on message boards as well as sending fax to Art Bell's Coast to Coast radio program, claiming to be from the year 2036. The name John Titor hadn't yet been attributed to these 2 separate cases, but over time, the name John Titor got tied to these 2 cases and a legend was created for an internet age. This person, presumably John Titor, claimed they came from a future where the United States had split off into several different factions, and he was from Florida and ended up fighting in the Second American Civil War. He also made a bunch of other claims which have since been disproven due to time or just haven't made sense. Not the least of which was the fact that he was there to obtain a IBM 5100 computer. Which you would think if he was from the future, surely they have something more advanced than an IBM 5100, which came out in the late 70s, if I'm not mistaken. It's a kind of really cool piece of internet folklore for our new modern age, despite being complete hokum, but it's still fun nonetheless. And I'll put a link to an IO9 article all about it in the description. It's really great, you should read it. Story 2, Stephen Hawking's Time Travel Party. In 2009, noted physicist Dr. Stephen Hawking decided to throw a party for time travelers. Now, what makes a party for time travelers different than a regular party? There ain't no party like a time travel party because the time travel party is circular. Well, Hawking specially crafted his party for time travelers by popping champagne and putting up a sign and not inviting anyone until the party was over. You see, Hawking wanted to prove a point. He wanted to prove the point that backwards time travel would be impossible. So he held the party, of course no one showed up because he hadn't invited anyone, waited for the party to be over, and then sent out invitations. His theory was that these invitations might last for years, kind of floating around, and inevitably, if time travel was discovered, someone would look at this, look at the coordinates on the invitation, as well as the time and date, and travel to his party. And since no one attended his party, we can assume that backwards time travel doesn't exist. Or maybe they just didn't want to go to your party, Dr. Stephen Hawking. It happens to the best of us. Story 3, Mr. Mallet's Time Machine. I first heard about this story on a broadcast of This American Life that was first broadcast in 2007. The theme of the show was plans and how people make plans. And the theme of this particular segment was all about a young man named Ronald Mallet. When Ronald Mallet was 10 years old, his father passed away, and as it would anyone, it hit him really hard. This was in the 1950s or 1960s, I believe, and the young Ron Mallet wanted to change time, so he went about inventing a time machine. But of course, him being a kid, he starts to just build a machine that looks like George Pal's time machine from the film, instead of actually thinking about time travel and what that means in terms of physics. So as a child, he realizes soon that that's not going to work, and it spurs him towards studying math and science and physics and electricity and all of these disciplines in an effort to figure out time travel. So Ronald Mallett becomes a doctor and becomes basically a master of all these disciplines in an effort to figure out how time travel works and whether or not he can use it to travel back in time and talk to his father before he dies. There is, of course, more to this story, and I'll put a link to the episode in the description. You guys should hear it. It is very beautiful, very heart-wrenching, and very human, while at the same time having to do with a lot of intricate mathematics and physics. It's really wonderful. You should listen to it. Yeah. So those were my 3 time travel adjacent stories inspired by Stephen King's 11/22/63 and Root Beer. This is Rob Walker saying, roads, where we're going, we won't need roads. This is really good. So those are my 3 time travel adjacent stories inspired by 11/22/63 and Root Beer.